strange today. But hello to JD that's here with me. Hello to any of you watching the recording online on our YouTube channel. My name is Whitney or Whit. You've probably seen me maybe in one of these videos before. I am a GMAT, GRE, EA instructor, productivity coach, and curriculum developer here at Manhattan Prep. And ever since we started doing these free prep hours, I have loved them because they give us a cool opportunity to work on special requests or things that we don't always have time to do in the context of our classes because we have a lot of material to cover and relatively set curriculum, if you will. But so these are things that we sometimes only get to do with tutoring students, or even then we don't always have the sort of time to dig into these topics really deeply. So we get to go nuts on whatever you ask us for. So tonight I had a request for some reading comp work. And so we're going to do some reading comp, which I'm glad you requested reading comp because I was actually looking over our free prep hours playlist and we just do not have enough reading comprehension. If I'm just going to be really honest, we don't have enough lessons on reading comprehension. So we're working on it. We're getting more. Here's the first. What I'd like to do is primarily focus on how to read the passage. That was sort of the specific questions that were asked, is how to read the passage. But even more than that, the two skills that everyone needs for reading comp, right, the two skills, is how to understand what makes a wrong answer. And even more so, how to predict a right answer. How to predict a right answer. So that's what we're going to talk about tonight. So let me just sort of type up for us. Let me get our screen going. Let me type up for us. I think I had it all set up. There we go. Boom. Can you see my screen? I hope you can. That makes me really happy if you can. So tonight's free prep hour, let's chat all things reading comp. Okay, so reading comp. And we really need to think about reading comp as sort of two pieces. So the first is all about how we read. All right, so there's step one, we have to read the passage, which might sound, obvious enough. And then step two, we have to answer the question. Be great if I could spell. Answer the question. Okay, so both of these things have to happen in order for us to do well in GMAT reading comp. I have to read the passage and figure out what the heck it's saying. But then I also need to be able to answer the question, right? And somebody said something to me once, actually one of our instructors, Reed, if you've ever watched any of his videos, he said something really elegant that I hadn't kind of articulated in the simplistic way that he did. But he made the comment that the test is standardized, right? So in order for a standardized test to be standardized, then wrong answers have to be wrong for the same reason over and over and over again. And right answers have to be right for the same reasons over and over and over again. They can't pluck out of thin air some brand new logic or reasoning for why an answer choice is right or wrong. And in terms of the style of questions or style of passage, they can't go way out of left field just for one problem, because then something about that is no longer standard and sort of betrays the point. So what that means for me is that I can, even if I'm not convinced that I can learn how to read better, although I am convinced that you can, even if you're not convinced that you can learn how to read better for the GMAT, you can certainly learn how to answer questions better for the GMAT. So what we're going to focus on tonight is when it comes to reading the passage, my real point here is to have a conversation. Okay, so as you read a passage, I want you to imagine that you're engaging with the actual author. You're stopping, you're asking questions, right? You're allowing yourself time to process. And so as we talk about having a conversation, I'd also like to consider, what does this look like in terms of processing and maybe taking notes if we are going to do such a thing. And some just tips, some tricks, some maybe little things that I like to do that keep me organized or that keep me reading carefully or carefully enough. So we'll talk about those. As far as answering the question, a couple of things. We should always, so we're going to focus most of our attention on predicting the answer. And that means before we actually look at the answer choices. So for the vast majority of reading comp problems, you should be predicting what the answer is going to say before you ever start looking at the available answer choices. This is rare exceptions to this. So unlike the rest of the GMAT, the verbal side of the GMAT, where you've got sentence correction and critical reasoning, sentence correction, you never want to predict the way you want a sentence to sound. You always want to just choose from what's available. And even critical reasoning, predicting can be a little tricky because let's say I'm trying to predict a strengthen, like there could be a lot of different things that would strengthen an argument. So spending a lot of time trying to predict them can be a bit of a fool's errand. So reading comp is different. Reading comp, we absolutely want to predict, like down to like pretty specific language, what I'm expecting the correct answer to say. Yeah. So we're going to work on predicting an answer. And then I also want to make sure that we're checking in on our process of elimination. Maybe I'll actually like type that all the way out. We got our process of elimination. And then let's talk about the notes for each specific question type, which are important. So we're talking like a big, broad overview. Hopefully we'll have time to do 2 passages and look through some questions. But let's jump in, right? So the deal with reading comp, at least my interpretation of reading comp, is that when we start to read, we are dropped into the middle of a passage. Just straight up dropped into the middle of it. We have no idea, like there's no title, there's no opening like paragraph, there's nothing. They didn't give me any upfront information. I don't know anything. Right? I don't know anything. And so the first thing I want you to begin thinking about as we read is this idea of reading with curiosity and reading like it's a conversation. Reading like a conversation. So imagine, right, like if this is the actual passage, right, there's like, some title, and then it's like literally some passage about, in this case, lorem ipsum in the text, blah, 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 blah. A reading comp passage is an excerpt that rarely, if ever, includes the intro or the author's actual like landing conclusion. So if you've ever read reading comp and felt like it seemed a little strange in the sense that it, like you're not kind of immediately picking up what they're talking about right away, this is why. Because you've not been given the title. You've not been given the outline. You've not been given the little blurb in Google. You didn't search for this thing, right? Like you didn't look it up. And so because of that, you have to imagine that you've literally been dropped into the middle of a conversation, or you've walked up at a party into the middle of a conversation where your boss is talking to some colleagues. Now, the last thing you're going to do when your boss is sitting there talking to some colleagues is just interrupt, stop them, go, hey, what are y'all talking about? Start over. Tell me all about it. No. You're going to work to seamlessly kind of follow in with the passage. Now, there's a difference between you walking into a conversation with your boss who's chatting with coworkers and reading comp. You walking into a conversation with your boss, you have no control over the speed of the conversation. You walking into the middle of a reading comp conversation, it's like having a pause button, right? And you can't rewind past where you started, so I can't get any earlier, but I can consistently fast forward and rewind the section that I step into. And that's going to be really important, that we are in the middle of a conversation. And so I am expecting to be a little clueless, at least initially, about what in the world is going on. But I am allowed to, and I should, freeze time periodically to get my head straight. So when it comes to this conversation, some of the primary things we're looking for are like, okay, what are they talking about? And so I'm having to use context clues to start to weave together a narrative. We're looking for a moment of, oh, that's what they're talking about. So that's what we're looking for with reading comp. You are not going to have that feeling at the beginning. I want you to walk into reading comp passages knowing that you are going to be lost. And you're going to be lost for a couple of sentences. I would argue that in general, my this is what we're talking about takes most of the first paragraph to accomplish in a multi-paragraph passage. It usually takes me about 3 or 4 paragraphs before I'm like, oh, I think I know what we're talking about. And it's not until I've moved deeper into the passage where I'm like, oh, you know what? I was right. This is what we're talking about. Or, oh, actually, I was a little off. A little bit off. So how do we, in a real world, stay with a conversation? Right, so we're sort of listening along, and we're just trying to, like, get our bearings and figure out, like, what are they talking about? Well, one of the things that we're doing while we're doing that is we are trying to weave a narrative together. So every new bit of information I hear, I'm trying to quickly, right, on my feet, think about how to connect that to what I've already read. So as you're reading in these first 2-3 sentences of a paragraph, I really want you to be thinking not only what did that just say, but maybe a little bit more importantly, how does it fit with now the second sentence? And how does the second half of the second sentence fit back in with what the first sentence said? And can I use kind of clue words that point me back and sort of start to sew together, literally stitch together an understanding of what's happening? Now, one of the most overlooked things that is powerful, and we do it in real life all the time, but we don't ever do it on reading comp, which is why we are so disconnected from the passage, is that the final piece here is to build in some expectation. So anytime we're in a conversation where we're actually invested, right, where we're like, ooh, yeah, you might notice that you are more likely to kind of anticipate what the other person is going to say. In fact, it's in those cases where you're most likely to be surprised because you're starting to think, like, where do I think this person's going with this? Is this going to be funny? Is this going to be sad? Like, oh gosh, what happens in this story? As you're thinking through those pieces, you are now setting expectations that will either be met, and you'll be like, yeah, exactly. Or they won't be met, at which point you will notice a feeling of like, oh, wait, hold on, that's not what I thought this was going to say. Wait, that's different. And so there'll be this moment of like waking you back up a bit, making you become present in the passage, in that moment where it's like, oh, I thought we were headed this way, and the passage just went this way. So as we work on our passages tonight, the thing I want you to think about is this setting of expectations. So as I read, I want to think, okay, when I read this, what do I think they're talking about in this moment? But also, what do I think the point of all of this is going to be? And you want to kind of keep reevaluating that point. Now, this all obviously needs to happen a little bit more rapidly. But we're working on, in fact, in many ways, slowing people down. It, for me at least, gets them to read overall and have better understanding faster. Okay. So let's start with a passage. We'll start with a little science, everybody's favorite. Everybody loves sciencey passages. And so for this passage, let me get this up here, and hopefully this is large enough to be able to see. So when a passage first comes on the screen, let's talk about the things that I would like for you to notice. Okay, so the first thing you want is to sort of sit back and take in the big picture. Like, what do I see? What's on the screen, right? What's happening? And just take a moment, right? Like, what's going on here? And get yourself acquainted with, I don't know how many paragraphs it is. Are there any words that are jumping off the page at you? And typically when you're looking at the first question, you'll also, or the first of the set, you'll also be able to see the first question. So the first thing I tend to do is just let my eyes sweep down the page. I also let my eyes kind of sweep across the first question. And then I take note of how many paragraphs this passage is going to be. And then I give myself a moment to close my eyes and sort of shake it out and get ready to read. All right, so before we jump into reading together, and I'm just going to kind of cover this up for a sec, a couple of things. So again, let me jot this down. So things I want you to do. I want you to, like big picture scan. So we're looking to see how long is it? Do I have to scroll, right? Am I having to, do I have to scroll meaning it's long. Eyes wash down the page. And what kind of, do I see any words that jump out at me? I might take a scan of the question text, not the answer choices necessarily, but just note, general type. What kind of question does it look like I'm going to be answering? Take a moment to note how many paragraphs. And then I close my eyes. I take a breath. And I set a little reminder for myself about, so I kind of, when I go into the test, I think about the fact that I have 3 tools. I have my brain, my eyes, and my hand. Okay? So if I try, right, to use all 3 of those things, my brain is going to be the fastest. My ability to just think is instantaneous, right? I can have a million thoughts in 2 seconds. There's literally almost no governor on how fast my brain can go. Now, my eyes, on the other hand, are a different story. While my brain might be the speed of light, my eyes are the speed of sound. And so they're fast, but they're nowhere near as instantaneous with information as my just brain is at coming up with imagery. So to read, my eyes moving across a page to read is relatively slow compared to my brain's ability to interpret. We can listen to words way faster than we can read them. And that's because as you read, you're actually reading silently to yourself. And so your eyes are partly being held back by your mouth's ability to make words. So just note that as we read, my brain is ready to go. My eyes, however, are a little bit slower. Throw my hand in the mix, and my hand is 65 on a highway compared to speed of light and speed of sound. And so if I'm going to be jotting anything down, my hand is going to be very, very, very slow in this system. But I still want to point out that our eyes and our brain are at a very great discrepancy in terms of processing speed, at least when it comes to reading. Again, our eyes take in visual cues very quickly, but reading words, that's slow. So if you have ever been reading and your eyes are moving, and all of a sudden you realize your eyes have been moving, but your brain is elsewhere, right? Right? If your eyes are still scrolling, but your brain has gone elsewhere, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, I don't remember anything I've read. That is a piece of this. Your eyes weren't moving fast enough to keep your brain engaged. So your brain doesn't really care about this passage anyways. And so your eyes aren't moving as quickly. So your brain found something else to pay attention to that was faster and more exciting. Your eyes are still moving, but your brain is somewhere else. You have officially zoned out. We sometimes call this highway hypnosis. It's where you're driving on the highway. You're like, how did I get to this exit? I don't remember the last 3 miles. I'm glad I'm alive. Right? So one thing we have to be careful of is that if we don't get brain on board, we are going to zone out really easily. The second piece of this is, and this is a big one for me, I will get reading and I will sometimes literally, now that I pay attention, notice that there's a record skip in my vision. That if I'm reading too quickly, there'll almost be a moment where it seems like somebody put a black slide in the middle of the projector. And so it's wait, what? And I will miss a word. Again, almost like a record skip. I will miss a word. And so one of the things you need to think about as you're reading, and so this is what I do when I close my eyes, because I want to turn off all of my visual cues for a moment. I'm going to take a breath and say, okay, we have to read this passage. Eyes and brain, we have to be on the same page. Hand, you're going to help. So I bring my hand, or not necessarily a finger, but a pen on board, whatever my writing utensil is, if I'm taking it at home or at the test center. And so my writing utensil is going to keep the pace for me so that my brain and my eyes know where they are. So my hand becomes like a conductor in an orchestra. Right? They're going to keep my eyes and my brain together. So close my eyes, take a breath, reminder. All right, brain, eyes, pen, we're all on board, right? We're all in this together. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to start my conversation. I don't want you to think of periods as the end of a concept. In fact, for longer sentences, you might have multiple ends of concepts buried in a single sentence. Yeah. So what I will do though, is I will use my pen. So as I look at my passage, I will use my pen and I'll drag it to wherever that first period is. So I'll literally, I'm a righty. So I'll take the pen and I'll literally hold it against the screen, like the butt end of the pen, hold it against the screen where that period is. And I'm looking at how far I have to go. Now I'm going to read the first sentence, and this begins my conversation. I am going to think, what does this mean? I don't really have context to put it in yet, but okay, cool. What do I think we might be talking about here? So take a moment and read just the first sentence. Okay. As I read the first sentence, I'll be honest, I don't want to spend a ton of time just trying to tease out the first sentence in a vacuum. I'm just going to note, like, okay, it said meteor stream is composed of dust particles that have been ejected from a comet. So we're in a science passage about meteors and comets. So my conversation goes this way, and I read sentences a bunch. So I'm going to go ahead and warn you right now that my style is to read pieces of this passage multiple times. So my first conversation is sentence 1, just kind of a general, what are we talking about? Oh, it's, in this case, science. It's about meteors and comets. I am then going to move my pen to the next period, which notice in this case now, look how long this sentence is. So I'm expecting I might need to pause in the middle of the sentence to figure out what's going on. I'm going to now read sentence 2. And then at the end, I'm going to connect back with sentence 1. And if it means that I reread sentences 1 and 2 together again, I can do that. So these part, and I'll give you a second to read the second sentence for this one. Okay, so we'll take a note that we are not even halfway through the first paragraph. So I'm not necessarily sure what the passage as a whole is talking about, but at least I'm getting a picture of sort of a story. So the second sentence says, these particles, words like these particles, those, that, one type of blah, like these are referring back to something else. So when we see this like referential language, we almost want to stop and make sure we know what we're talking about. So these particles, which particles? So the dust particles. Okay, so a meteor stream is composed of dust particles. So I'm envisioning a meteor stream. I hope I have a sense of what a meteor stream is, but it has something to do with a comet and dust that's been ejected from or thrown out from a comet. So I might actually even start on my own paper to kind of sketch this, just because I tend to like doodle a little bit while I'm reading. So I've got a comet. I'm going to draw myself like a little weird comet. Here's my comet with its tail. And it's like running through space. So there's my little comet. And apparently a meteor stream, what they're calling a meteor stream, is a bunch of dust particles. Okay, so these particles, right, have been ejected from a parent comet at a variety of velocities. They get chucked out at different speeds. They follow the same orbit as the parent comet, but due to their different velocities, oh, that's right, the variety of velocities, due to their differing velocities, they slowly gain on or fall behind the comet until a shroud of dust surrounds the entire cometary orbit. Okay, shroud of dust. So All right, I'm trying to envision, right? I'm like really trying to make this, like I want to sink my teeth into it. Because I want to know if I can get into these first 2 to 3 sentences, the rest of the passage is going to be so much easier. So I have a comet, it's flying through space. It's shooting off and apparently disintegrating. My comet is disintegrating. And as it disintegrates, it's kicking dust out. And it's kicking that dust out, ejecting it, at different speeds. So it's kicking some dust out like really quickly. It's kicking some dust out really slowly. And so it seems like, all right, here's my comet, I guess, moving at a speed on its little orbit. All of the dust, some of the dust is moving faster than the comet. Some of the dust is actually moving slower than the comet is. And so depending on which direction it got sent out, it's all still kind of traveling together. But some of them pieces are like, getting closer to the comet. Some of them might be moving further away from the comet. Right? So there's like some movement happening once this dust is ejected, but it's like a dust cloud, right? We've got a big dust fuzzy cloud around my comet. This dust fuzzy cloud is apparently what's known as a meteor stream. Now I start, as I'm kind of piecing these pieces together, if I move to the third sentence, I might then add that in. But at this point, as soon as I start to have a mental picture, I want to then ask the question, what do I think this passage is going to be about? And so I will often just stop and just out of curiosity ask, okay, is it going to be, it seems to be about meteor streams. I'm wondering what they're going to tell me. Like, maybe there's different types of meteor streams. Maybe, what happens to them. I don't know. So let's move to our third sentence. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to find our third period, put our pen on it. Now, I don't have to make sense of each sentence as an independent sentence. Notice that I for this passage, thought that the two sentences together created kind of the bigger picture of what was going on. Also note that those first 2 sentences could actually be deconstructed into a full-blown paragraph of their own. Comets disintegrate. As they do, dust gets kicked out. That dust is coming off at different speeds. Because of those different speeds, the dust, although it does stick to the same orbit as the comet, that dust can be moving faster or slower, catching up with or falling behind. So I could write 7 little short normal human sentences with what they wedged into 2. So now let's read our third sentence, see how that builds in. And here is a moment where we're getting a little foreshadowing. Astronomers have hypothesized. Yeah, exactly. Right? Astronomers have hypothesized. Okay, that the meteor stream should broaden with time as the dust particles' individual orbits are perturbed by planetary gravitational fields. Okay, that's a lot. So I get that planets have gravitational fields, right? Like Earth has gravity. Got it. So I've got that. The theory is that over time, as these comets come around and these meteor showers come around, and like now I'm starting to think like, oh, that's true. We have meteor showers, right? Like that's, shooting stars. Got it. That the dust particles are being kind of bothered by the fact that they are coming near gravitational pull of whatever planets they fly by. Okay. So astronomers have hypothesized that a meteor stream should broaden with time, so that dust particles, I guess, are just going to keep spreading out over time. What do I think the passage is about now? And as soon as we've got astronomers or scientists hypothesizing things, we want our gut reaction to be, they're probably either going to prove it or disprove it. Yeah, exactly. Are we going to prove it right or are we going to prove it wrong? Rarely do we ever get full-blown prove and disprove. Sometimes. We're definitely going to test the theory, or we're going to look at ways in which the theory was tested. We'll see if there were, some proof for it being supported or not. I'm also going to be on the lookout for any alternative theories. Right? Like, is there a new one, an old one? So there's going to be something around this hypothesis. Like, yes, they've set the stage. Now we're dealing with hypothesis. Great. So we'll read another sentence. We'll find the next period, which in this case is pretty far away. All the way down here. And again, I really use the period trick mostly so that if a sentence is 4 or 5 or 6 lines long, I give myself permission to not have to get all the way to the period. I let myself sort of stop along the way if I need to. So that's just to help me see how much information are they trying to jam into one chunk together. So let's check out our recent computer modeling experiment. Hey, we thought we were going to be testing out this hypothesis, and we are apparently. So it tested, and then note the languaging. It tested this hypothesis, right? Connects back. I might, as I'm starting to understand and have some predictions, start to read a little faster. So as I start to get predictions, I read faster and I connect larger chunks of information. So for example, right, our recent computer modeling experiment tested this hypothesis by doing some stuff. Now, I know that a lot of instructors and folks will say things like skim. I don't know what to skim until I've read it. So it kind of defeats the purpose a little bit, right? So what I normally do is I try to read it. If it seems kind of really fact heavy, I'm going to go, okay, let me just keep reading and see if the logical information is coming next. So for something like this, they, over a projected 5,000 year period, on the positions of a group of hypothetical dust particles. So we've got some fake dust particles. I still don't really have a lot of information yet, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this sentence. I think more might be coming. In the model, right, so we'll head to our next period. In the model, the particles were randomly distributed throughout a computer simulation of the orbit of an actual meteor stream, the Geminid. The researcher found as expected. Okay, so hold on, let me back up then, because now we're at like a close. So it does feel like these two sentences sort of fit together. We tested a hypothesis. Apparently they took an actual meteor stream, Geminid, and they made up a simulation of it. So here's Geminid, and we're going to look at a computer simulation. Let's pretend these are the dust particles around, or the dust cloud. Is it a dust cloud? Particles. Dust particles, right, around this Geminid stream. And we're going to look at what happens to it over the course of 5,000 years. So we're going to hit fast forward on the computer model, and we're going to see what happens to this little clump of dust particles over the next 5,000 years. Cool. I get what this computer modeling simulation is. And then I love it. Good notice. The researcher found as expected. Well, what was expected? Astronomers have hypothesized that a meteor stream should broaden with time. They found as expected that the computer model stream broadened with time. Boom. Okay. All of a sudden, though, we get a new piece. Wait. That is not what I expected. I thought, astronomers have hypothesized that this was... Yeah, exactly. So, astronomers have hypothesized that the stream should broaden with time, and this computer model showed that it did. I know, right? I know. So it's okay, here's the part. The researcher found, as expected, that the computer model stream broadened with time. So here's what we do know. The hypothesis that the stream should broaden with time is true. However, conventional theories predicted that the distribution would be increasingly dense towards the center of a meteor stream. Okay, wait a minute. So apparently this is sort of like a theory under the theory that astronomers have hypothesized that the meteor stream will broaden with time, meaning get wider over time, which according to this, it does. It does, in fact, get wider over time. That said, conventional theories, and this word conventional should potentially make us think that that's going to end up wrong. Conventional theories thought that the distribution, so they're not fighting whether the meteor stream got broad, just what's now happening to the distribution within that broadening stream. So we need to see this as one broad, like main hypothesis of broadened stream proven true, or at least the computer model indicates that it's likely true. However, there's like a sub-theory that the distribution of the stream, so not just the general width of the thing, but the distribution internally, conventional theories thought that it would get increasingly dense towards the center. And surprisingly, the computer model showed the opposite. They show a stream that gradually came to resemble a thick-walled hollow pipe. So we've got a stream that's getting broader. Conventional theories think that as it's spreading out, the center is actually getting more dense. The computer model shows that as it's spreading out, it's actually spreading out. Like you're getting this. So here we go. So the key are which hypothesis. So what it looks like is that we actually have, so the hypothesis is that the meteor stream broadens with time. That's the big theory. Yeah. So theory broadens with time. Let me get some text here that we can write with. So our main theory, or sorry, I should say the main hypothesis. So astronomer hypothesis is that the stream broadens over time. And within that, a conventional theory is that within that broader stream, the distribution inside the stream will get increasingly dense towards the center. So it seems like, if I had to kind of be a betting woman on this, that your conventional theorists see that, like, sure, we're going to keep disturbing these particles, right? These dust particles. And so it's going to some of these dust particles are going to continue to be shot out in further and further and further. So it's getting broader, right? But at the end of the day, there will still be a sort of coalescing around the, comet. That even though it is getting broad over time, it's still going to be, more dense in the middle. It does not. So the conventional theory would be like a subset of it. So the conventional theory is essentially saying, as it broadens, this happens. The computer model shows that as it broadens, the center actually doesn't get denser. The center actually gets more empty. Exactly. So what we've got is we see a situation where, true, the big picture that it gets broad over time is true, but this part doesn't show up. We don't see that it gets dense over time. In fact, we see the opposite. That over time, the computer model, right? So now we've got our computer model, shows a thick-walled hollow pipe. Okay. So what do I think this passage is about? Well, we've talked about that the main idea that it's broadened over time has come true. Like that, the model, at least the computer model supports that idea, that theory. But we now have a computer model that's going against what many sort of conventional theorists would have said would be happening as it gets broad. That as it gets broad, it actually appears to be becoming more hollow as opposed to being dense. And I think why this is confusing is because most of us would potentially say that as the stream gets broad, it would get less dense in the center. So it's strange to me that the conventional theorist would be like, yeah, it's going to get really broad over time, but then also get more dense in the middle. Feels a little weird. Here's what I would say. I would say that yes, in the sense that conventional theories would be a subset of astronomers. The people who believe this thing would also be astronomers. So we seem to be talking more generically about like astronomers as a whole. And that the like typical theory that most astronomers have when they're out talking about this broadening meteor stream is turning out that at least the computer model isn't backing that up. I've hit the end of the first paragraph. Yeah, of course. I've hit the end of the first paragraph. What I'd like is to get to a point where I can explain the point of the first paragraph. But I'll say this, rarely do I get what the point of the first paragraph is until I have finished or at least gotten a start on the second paragraph. So traditionally, I don't know what this is doing until I see where we're going. I don't know what this is the setup for. Here's what I know. They taught me what a meteor stream was, and we've now started to talk about what we think happens to a meteor stream over time and what some computer models are showing. And specifically computer models of this like Geminid meteor shower. Okay. Second paragraph. We'll start into our first period. And I'll slow down again because I'm trying to figure out what this paragraph is about now. So, whenever the Earth passes through a meteor stream, a meteor shower occurs. Okay, that seems reasonable. Moving at a little over 1,500,000 miles per day around its orbit, the Earth, okay, so the Earth is moving a little over 1.5 million miles per day. We're hauling. The Earth would take, on average, just over a day. So I'm thinking if this is my meteor shower now, my arm has become my meteor shower. So here's my Earth. Earth would take, on average, just over a day to cross the hollow computer model Geminid stream if the stream were 5,000 years old. Wait, where did we talk about 5,000 years old? Okay, 5,000 years old was the impact. Okay, it was what would happen after 5,000 years on this dust cloud, on this hypothetical dust cloud. So, according to, right, like this computer model, the Earth at its current speed should take just over a day to cross the entire breadth of this Geminid meteor shower. So a whole day to get from one side of it to the other. Assuming that if the stream were actually 5,000 years old. So what does that mean? If the stream were 5,000 years old. Or even the next little piece. 2 brief periods of peak meteor activity during the shower would be observed. One as the Earth entered the thick-walled pipe, and one as it exited. Yeah, exactly. I know. This is tricky, right? So, would be observed. What we're seeing, this is a prediction. Whenever the Earth passes through a meteor shower occurs. Great. Moving at a little over 1.5 million miles per day around its orbit, the Earth would take, notice this is like future, would take just over a day to cross the hollow stream if the stream were 5,000 years old. 2 periods of activity would be observed. This is all a prediction. All of this is saying, if the model is true, that computer hollow pipe all of this projected 5,000 year period, right? Like if all of this computer model is true or accurate, if you will, this is what we would expect to see. Exactly. So be careful. Does the computer model agree with the conventional theory? The computer model agrees with broadens over time. So this is the computer says this. The computer also says the computer's like, wait, it doesn't get more dense towards the center. So conventional theories, distribution gets more dense. Computer model shows the opposite. Shows that instead of being more dense towards the center and spreading out but more finely, the computer model shows that as it spreads out, it's actually even spreading out all the way from the center. So you're getting this like hollow macaroni noodle, if that makes sense. You're getting like a tube around the trajectory, right? So you're getting a hollow tube, not dense in the center. So the computer model shows broad, hollow. If the computer model is true, this is all what we would expect to see. Okay, so now here's how we can start to put the pieces together. Paragraph 1. So as we start, this is where I might actually jot down on my paper the beginnings of some notes. And the only notes, I mean, I might have written down some of this or like sketched my little comment, but the only time I write anything down is in an attempt to better understand what's being said, not to transcribe. So I don't want to take anything from the screen and put it on my paper just to preserve it. I'm only jotting down notes on my paper to try and make sense of things or to make connections. So I might sketch it. I might sort of say like, oh, hollow tube. Like that's what we actually see is a hollow tube. Mm-hmm. So what I will start to write down though is a note to self, P1, paragraph 1. Intro meteor stream. And then computer model findings. That's what we get. Paragraph 2 seems to be predictions. Because notice what comes next. There is no reason why the Earth should always pass through the stream's exact center, so the time interval between the two bursts of activities would vary. This is all prediction. This is 100% prediction. Every single bit of this is all what we expect to see in real life. So I jot down a note like, okay, paragraph 2, prediction based on the computer model. So according to what the computer model says, this is what we should see. That it would take the Earth about a day to get across the meteor shower. And now let's zoom in on this piece. 2 brief periods of peak meteor activity during the shower would be observed. One as the Earth entered the thick hollow-walled pipe, and one as it exited. Okay, so if I'm looking at this, right, as a kind of picture, here we go. Let's get in here for a sec. So if this is my meteor shower, right, here's my comet and its little tail. Right. And over time, it's like shooting off dust. Now, over time, this dust wall, right, is going to get, and I'm going to do the dust in red so it's easier to see. So this dust wall is going to get broader over time. Who knows how long that's going to take, right? Broader over time on these little dust particles. But what we find is that rather than getting really dense around the center, they actually start to get really dense in like a ring. So think this ring is like at an angle. I'm just not very good at drawing it at an angle. It would kind of look more like if this is an inner ring you know, kind of coming around it. And this is like a ring coming around it. And the comet's like sort of coming at you. So imagine now that the comet's coming right at us. Okay, so let me clear this. So if my dust cloud is getting broader over time, but, right, so it's getting really broad. It's getting out here and getting super broad. This is it. Right. And the comet, this is the comet in the middle coming right at me. Right. This is the comet like shooting in my direction. What we start to find, according to this, is that it begins to get more and more dust in like a thick hollow ring, like a hollow pipe out here. So there's dust all through this system, and it's getting broader over time. But instead of having a ton of dust right in by the comet, it seems to be that the comet dust is actually getting further and further away from the comet itself. Right? So we're getting more and more dust happening kind of out here in this area, and way less over time inside. Yeah. So lots of, there we go. And so over time, this part in here is getting less and less dense. Okay, so now if we read the passage, we got our little picture. If we read the passage, it says, it would take the Earth just over a day to cross through this hollow pipe if the stream were 5,000 years old. And 2 brief periods of peak activity would be observed. Okay, so here, let me get a little planet Earth action happening over here. Let's make planet Earth yellow. That'd be a very, no, that looks like a sun. We'll make planet Earth a little green planet Earth. Here we are. Boop. So here's our little green planet Earth. It would take so to get across this whole thing would take just over a day. So for the Earth to go from, you know, one side of it across to the other side, they're saying would take a day. Okay, got it. And 2 brief periods of meteor activity during the shower would be observed. One as the Earth entered and one as it exited. So I would like come in, I would have lots of meteor activity, and then it would maybe get a little quiet, and then I'd have lots of meteor activity, and then it would be over. So that is what our computer simulation is predicting, this hollow wall. And it does say there's no reason why the Earth should always pass through the stream's exact center, so the time interval between the bursts might change. So, okay, I see that. Like, if we went right through the middle, right, there'd be a long time between the coming in through one burst and going out through another. But let's say we cross, like, kind of at an edge. We'd sort of, like, hit a burst, maybe have a little bit of quiet, hit a burst, and then go. So that's what this kind of second paragraph is trying to explain, what the scientists think we should see if this happens in real life. Okay, last paragraph. We finally have our question. All the way down here, we have our question. Has this predicted twin peaked, right, activity been observed for the annual, yearly Geminid meteor shower? Notice that it says, the actual yearly. Annual yearly would be redundant, I guess. But so has this been observed for the actual yearly Geminid meteor shower? The data from 1970 to 79 shows just such an occurrence. Bifurcation meaning 2, meaning separate. So bink and then bink. And so it shows just such a thing. Yep, exactly. So paragraph 3, totally what we expected. Simulation was right. So now we add P3, comp matches real life. Nailed it. Look at us go. And so, just to make this a little bit easier to see, there we go. Cool. And so the Gemini data, blah, 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 a secondary burst of meteor activity being clearly visible at an average of 19 hours after the first burst. So it does say, right, notice, just over a day to cross the hollow computer model Geminid stream if the stream were 5,000 years old. But what we found is that it took 19 hours. after the first burst, right? So if at 5,000 years old, it would take just over a day, and what we see is that it actually only took 19 hours, it must mean that it's not that old yet, which is also what we find. The time intervals, no, the simulation's not wrong. So the simulation is basically showing what would happen over the course of 5,000 years in the spread of the trajectory. So first they said, let's pretend that the spread is 5,000 years old. If it's 5,000 years old, we expect the Earth to take a full day. Because the Earth took less than a full day, we'll look back in the model, it actually means that this is younger than 5,000 years old. Mm-hmm. So that's where we get the bursts suggest that the actual stream is only about 3,000 years old. So comp matches real life, and here are the implications. This is what it means. Right? So comp matches real life plus age implication. So it would appear that the Geminid meteor shower, or meteor stream, is about 3,000 years old. That's pretty cool. So we have a sense of what's going on. Yep, exactly. Yep, exactly. Okay, so our job now is to be ready to answer anything from main idea up to all sorts of specific detail. All sorts of specific detail. Okay, now the primary focus question for this passage, side note, is unfortunately not a free resource. That said, what I can do is, or what I have done, is I have sort of clipped each of these. I've clipped the actual answer choices, sort of redacted them. And I want you to see that we don't even have to know the full main idea. Like, we don't have to even know the full question that they're asking. So let me hold on one second. In order to be able to do a decent job of answering these questions. So main idea are often the case that if it's enough for us to just know a little bit of the text. Like, a little bit of text can get us there. Okay, so if we're going to think about what is the primary focus of this passage, yeah, exactly. So the primary focus of the passage is to sort of identify this hypothesis and dig in on whether this computer model that we think plays out in the real world. So if we start to look over things, are we comparing two scientific theories and contrasting their predictions? No, that's too narrow. That's way too narrow. What about B? Are we describing a new model and noting that or how it explains real observations? Kind of. Right? We are describing this new model, this computer model. I would say that it says a recent computer model. So that would be new. Yeah, I would definitely want to look up the word new. You're exactly right to have done so. Describes a new model. It's like a recent modeling experiment would say new. So I would hang on to it. It may not be right, but it doesn't have any automatic wrong flags for me. C, evaluate the results of a scientific experiment and suggest further research, or we're not suggesting anything new. We're not trying to just simply compare and contrast. We are also not, evaluating the results. I mean, we are kind of evaluating the results, but not for suggesting further research. Are we explaining how two different natural phenomena are related to one another? Not particularly. Right? We're not looking at two different natural phenomena. We're really only looking at meteor showers. Are we analyzing recent data derived from observations of an actual event? No. We are analyzing data derived from a computer model and then comparing that to observations. And so our primary purpose will always be really general. Yeah, so the real edit of this would be like explains the you could actually take the nature of. They're just making it wordy for no good reason. You could leave it as describing a new model and showing that it explains a natural phenomenon, a real natural phenomenon. They're using this language nature of observations to just be more complicated. Truly. Yeah, so the key is that, so the correct answer actually reads essentially let me see. Basically, let me redact it a little bit. Here we go. Here we are. And this would be actual. So this is essentially what the correct answer. And so the idea is that it shows us a model and shows us that the model does in fact explain what we see in the real world. Up next, though, what I want to try is, with the last little bit of our time, I want to look at what I mean by predicting an answer. Okay, we're going to do it with one quick question type. Okay, so predicting an answer is traditionally something that we'll do with specific questions. So questions that ask for some sort of detail or for some sort of why. Oh, yeah, so the model is the computer simulation. Right? Like that is the computer simulation is the model. I think that's where the like confusion is. So according to this passage, why do the dust particles in a meteor stream eventually surround a comet's original orbit? So before I ever look at my answer choices, the first thing I do is I try to figure out, where do we talk about dust particles surrounding a comet's original orbit? Now, if this is something that's mentioned repeatedly, I will often look to the first use of it and see if I can't find something to predict there. So a meteor stream is composed of dust particles that have been ejected, and these particles follow the same orbit, but due to their differing velocities, they slowly gain on or fall behind until a shroud of dust surrounds the entire cometary orbit. Okay, so I want you to see synonyms here. Surround a comet's original orbit, surrounds the entire cometary orbit. So why would it be that dust particles why do dust particles eventually build a shroud of dust that surrounds? Well, it's this piece in the middle. Due to their differing velocities, they slowly gain on or fall behind the disintegrating comet. Be careful. Where do we talk about planetary gravitation? This says that it would broaden with time as their orbits are perturbed by planetary gravitational fields. But that's not the part where it explains why they surround the cometary orbit. Why do they eventually surround the orbit? That's this piece right here. Until a shroud of dust. Eventually. Yeah? So this piece of until a shroud of dust, that's eventually they surround a comet's original orbit. So why? That's this sentence. Due to their differing velocities, because they gain on and fall behind, that's what forms this shroud of dust. Now, next, the hypothesis is that these dust particles will then broaden over time, but that's not what makes them form the dust cloud to start with. Okay, so keep it in mind. It's going to be in the same sentence where we talk about it. This says, until a shroud of dust surrounds the entire cometary orbit, due to their differing velocities. Right? It says, we want to follow where it's like, oh, you're saying, due to this thing, so due to their differing velocities, there eventually become a shroud of dust. So it's not about time. Nothing in here talks about when they were shot out, just their speeds. We do have some commentary about velocity, and velocity, so we'll keep those. Note that B is going to play on that trap of planetary gravitational fields. But B says their orbits are uncontrolled by planetary gravitational fields. And this says their orbits are perturbed. Having their orbits perturbed and being uncontrolled by are not synonymous. So I want an answer choice that says because of their different velocities. Not that their velocity slows or that it's slower, but that they're differing velocities. And so our correct answer is A. The number one most powerful thing you can start to practice is predicting an answer. Like trying to predict, okay, what is this? What is the answer, right? For example, we'll try two other quick ones. In this question, the question states, the author states that the research described in the first paragraph was undertaken in order to. So the research described, so this experiment, what did this research do? It tested this hypothesis. So I'm now going to go ask, it's testing a hypothesis. Which hypothesis? Oh, this hypothesis. So what I'm looking for is that why, what was the reason? What was their why for doing this? It was to test the hypothesis that a meteor stream should broaden with time. Great. I'm looking for an answer choice that was to test the hypothesis that a meteor stream should broaden with time. Yes, in this case, research would be hypothesis. So the computer simulation would be the same, this experiment. And so only one answer choice gives us to test the hypothesis that a meteor stream should broaden with time without even reading the answer choice. That's pretty good, I'd say. That's pretty good. Here's the thing, is we never want to read past the passage. Sure, somebody involved in this experiment might think that it would be useful to figure out whether any computer model could be useful in explaining any astronomical data, but we are told directly that a recent computer modeling experiment tested this hypothesis. Psst. Right? It would have had to say, tested whether a computer model could explain astronomical data. The fact is that we had this model before we compared it to the real data. So we want to read, just like on the previous one, I want to read directly from the passage. I don't want to think, well, maybe this kind of makes sense. I guess I could make the argument for that. That's why you always predict an answer. When we don't predict answers, lots of answer choices can sound tempting. But if I went in and said, a recent computer modeling experiment tested this hypothesis. Okay, so the whole point of this thing was to test this hypothesis. The hypothesis is that a meteor stream should broaden with time, period. That is the only answer I'm looking for now. If nothing matches my prediction, okay, maybe I'll go back to the drawing board. But it is a rare day that nothing matches my prediction. Your goal is not to read all the answer choices to see which one sounds good. Your goal is to get very clear on the prediction and then find the match. That's the kind of very crucial piece here, is that we find a match. So one more. And again, I want you to think, find a prediction and commit to it. Don't search the answer choices. Find a prediction and commit to it. So we've got a highlight. It can be inferred from the passage that which of the following would most probably, so would likely be observed during the Earth's passage through the meteor stream if conventional theories were right. Ooh. Okay, conventional theories were correct. What did the conventional theories think again? Read the sentence that says conventional theories. So don't just go find numbers in the passage. Read just that sentence. So stay confined. That's the number one thing that hurts students, is that they start bouncing around all over the place. The passage is going to send you exactly where you need to go. So conventional theories predicted that the distribution of particles would be dense towards the center. That's all we know about conventional theories. All of this stuff, this is according to the computer model, not conventional theories. All we know about conventional theories is that the distribution of particles would be increasingly dense towards the center. Exactly. So if this, right, if this is my meteor stream, oh, I don't want a square, I want a circle. If this is my meteor stream, it's going to get more and more and more and more and more and more dense in towards the center. I'll just keep putting little ones. No, I don't want it there. Here we go. So more and more dense towards the center, right? So in the middle here, it's going to be the most dense. And this guy out here, will make him even lighter. He'll be like, whatever. He needs to just not be a thing. So we'll make it less dense out here. Right? Yeah, so well, I don't want to say all the predictions wouldn't come true. Stay with the one line. You don't have to make that many leaps, right? So stick with me. Stay in and limited. So if I were to draw my little meteor stream that was now more dense towards the center, right? So we're getting more dense in here towards the center. And I'm the Earth. Here I come, my little green Earth. Get my little green Earth coming along. Here we go. So here's my little green Earth. And it's coming across. What would we expect if the distribution of particles is increasingly dense towards the center? What would be happening to the meteor shower for my little planet Earth? I would start getting meteors, and then what? 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 Not tough to assume. Just look at right? Like read it off the picture. What did we think would happen as the Earth went through this version? What was going to happen when it went through the hollow pipe? It was going to take about a day if it were 5,000 years old. And what kind of meteor shower was it going to experience? What was it going to observe? And when we see the word observed, yes, right? This sort of twin peaks. So we've got this twin peaked activity been observed. So what would have been observed if the conventional theories had been right? Well, we wouldn't have had, right? So if we're thinking about this, what would be observed during the Earth's passage? Let me actually put this in a different color so it matches. What would be observed during the Earth's passage through a meteor stream? Well, has the predicted twin peak activity been observed? Okay, so this is the computer model. The conventional theories would say you don't get twin peaks. Conventional would say as you come through, right, it builds and it builds and builds and builds and builds, and then you have like crazy meteor shower, and then it shrinks off, and then it's over. So the computer model predicted twin peak. Conventional would predict single peak. So like this rise towards this big single peak in the middle, and then drift back down. I'm going to go with I don't think we can say. You're exactly right. I can't say whether it would be more intense or not. Who knows? I literally have to stick to what the passage told me. Conventional theories said that it would be dense towards the middle. So what would we observe if it got really dense in the middle would be that like we start to see meteors, and then we see more and more and more and more and more, and we see a whole bunch, and then we see fewer and fewer and fewer and fewer and fewer, and then it's over. And so that's where we would get meteor activity would gradually increase to a single peak and then gradually decline. Steady throughout, nobody said steady. Rise to a peak at the beginning and at the end, that's the computer model. Random bursts of very high meteor activity would be interspersed with periods of I don't have random anywhere. Nobody said anything about random. And then fully absent meteor, they didn't tell me. I don't know anything about what happens if the Earth only comes through the outer areas. I don't think it would be absent. I mean, it would still have some. It just wouldn't have a lot, right? You just kind of come across the edge of it. And so we wouldn't have totally absent. That's too strong. Yeah. So the key, notice if we stick just to the words right when they tell us, we were able to predict 1, 2, 3, all 3 correct answers directly from the text. So we want to be very careful, like reading off or trying to combine a lot of things. In general, our job is to try and understand the big picture. And then as we get to a specific question, try to predict based on the information given very clearly and directly what we think would be the appropriate answer for the question. I think intense, because it says increasingly dense. So you'd have like a single intense peak. I think that would be fine. What I'd say is it's not enough for me to eliminate it. Right? So if I said meteor activity would gradually increase to a single peak and then gradually decline, maybe I don't love intense. Like, do I know that it would be intense? I don't know, but maybe I would leave it. I definitely can show that steady is wrong. I definitely know that the hollow pipe to peak is wrong. I know that random is wrong. And I know saying something about absent, there's no proof for absent. And so I may not love intense, but as far as inference goes, I'm allowed to make the teeny tiniest of leaps. And so I might let intense go. Exactly. We're just not going to see these like twin showers. We're not going to get like one and another. I wouldn't say all that is inferable is one meteor shower. No. It's increasingly dense. So it would be a meteor shower that increases in intensity before it slopes back down. One meteor shower would be the same as steady. That'd still be just one meteor shower that's steady throughout. Or one meteor shower that peaks at the beginning, sort of trails, and then peaks again. That's still technically one meteor shower. It's just the peaks, there's more than one peak. What conventional theories are saying in this meteor shower is that it would be, in fact, as we cross this, it would be increasing in intensity until at a point it then begins decreasing in intensity. So watch the language of it would be increasingly dense. This does in fact mean that it would gradually increase and then gradually decline, like to a point and then back down. Just that there would only be one peak, not like two peaks. All right, so I know this was science passages are often a lot, that's why I picked one. But friendly reminder that we have all kinds of free prep hours. In fact, we do have a few, not a ton, but we do have several reading comp ones. Also, as a note, if you haven't ever before, come hang out with us and take a class. We have our session ones of any class that we teach is free. In fact, I'm teaching a session one for a brand new class tomorrow night, right? So you're always welcome to come hang out with us. Any session one you could possibly ever want. That's free. Again, you don't have to like sign up or give us a card or anything. You can just attend. You just need to sign in. And if you haven't done so before, we have free practice exams. You can sign up, or we have a free practice exams. We have 6 you can purchase total, but the first one's free. And you can get that at our manhattanprep.com website under GMAT. If you need it, we've also got GRE resources. We've got tons of books. We got everything you need. So you want more RC, check us out. If you're watching this recording, check us out in the playlist below. We have tons, like hundreds of hours of video at this point on all the things that you could possibly want to know about the GMAT. And we are updating them, or we make new ones several times a month. So if you haven't, click subscribe so that you get a notification when our newest ones come out. And otherwise, it has been a pleasure to get to work with you tonight. I'm hoping that you had at least a little bit of fun with this crazy passage. And then we will talk to you, hopefully, at one of these events soon. Take care. Have a good rest of your evening.